Have you ever faced a decision in your leadership where every option felt costly? Maybe it was letting go of a project that you poured yourself into, or maybe a staffing decision that was right for the organization, but painful personally, or perhaps telling the truth in a situation where it could cost you influence, reputation, or even your job. Those are the moments that test what we really believe about leadership and about God. In this final part of our series, Leading Through Uncertainty, it's one of the most intense stories in Scripture, and it has a lot to teach us about sacrificial leadership and difficult choices. Hey, friends, thanks for joining today on Leading with Bill. I'm Bill Martin, your personal leadership coach, and this is where biblical wisdom can transform your leadership and life. By the time we reach Genesis 22, Abraham has already left his home country in obedience. He's lived through years of waiting and delay and finally received the promised son, Isaac. Now, Isaac isn't just Abraham's child. He represents the promise, the future, the nation, the fulfillment of everything God has said. And then we read this in Genesis 22 in verses 1 and 2. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." That is a staggering command. Your son, your only son, whom you love. In verse 3 says, early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He doesn't stall, doesn't negotiate. He moves in obedience. Even though this command cuts to the core of his heart and his future. As they walk, Isaac notices something is missing. Verses 7 and 8, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." Abraham binds Isaac, lays him on the altar, and raises the knife. And then, but the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looks up and sees a ram caught in a thicket. He offers the ram instead of Isaac, and he names that place, "The Lord will provide." This is a deeply emotional, difficult story, but it reveals something powerful about faith and leadership. There are three leadership lessons I want to draw out of this moment. First, holding the promise with open hands. Isaac is the fulfillment of God's promise. Abraham has waited decades for this child. And yet, when God tests him, Abraham is willing to surrender the very thing he waited for. That doesn't mean God is reckless with his promises. Text is clear. This is a test, a heart check. For leaders, this raises a hard question. Are there things in your leadership that you're holding too tightly? It might be a role or title that has become part of your identity, or perhaps a program or initiative you started that you don't want to let go. Or maybe it's a vision that began from God, but has slowly become more about your ego than his purpose. Healthy leaders hold even good things with open hand. We steward roles, teams, and opportunities, but we don't cling to them as if they're ours to own. Abraham shows us that faithful leadership is willing to say, "God, even the things I love most are ultimately yours." Second, obedience over self-protection. Abraham's obedience in Genesis 22 is costly. From his perspective, this command threatens everything. his relationship with his son, his understanding of God's promise, his entire future. And yet he chooses obedience over self-protection. In leadership, sacrificial decisions often look less dramatic, but are still deeply costly. Like telling the truth when a cover-up would be easier. Admitting a mistake instead of blaming someone else. Making a decision that's best for the organization, even if it means less comfort or recognition for you. The question becomes, am I willing to do what's right, even if it costs me personally? Abraham's story reminds us that faith-filled leadership is not about preserving our comfort, but it's about aligning with God's will, even when it's hard. Third is trusting that God provides. When Isaac asks, "Where is the lamb?" Abraham responds, "God himself will provide the lamb." He doesn't know exactly how God will resolve this, but he trusts God's character. And God does provide a ram in the thicket, a substitute for the altar. Abraham names the place the Lord will provide, and God reaffirms his promise. Leaders who trust God's provision can make hard calls without being paralyzed by fear of loss. That doesn't mean we're careless. It means we believe if God is calling us to obedience, that he will also be faithful to meet us in that obedience. Let's talk about how to live this out in your leadership. First, clarify what you're unwilling to compromise. Before you're in a high pressure moment, decide what you will not compromise. That might include integrity and honesty, treating people with dignity and respect, obedience to what you believe God has clearly called you to do. Write these down. Share them with a trusted friend, a mentor, or spouse. And when the pressure hits, you won't be scrambling to figure out what matters most. You'll already know. Second, count the cost, then choose integrity. Sacrificial leadership doesn't ignore the cost. Abraham feels the weight of what God is asking. In your context, be honest about what a decision might cost you. Time, comfort, reputation, or even opportunity. Bring that to God in prayer. Seek wise counsel if you can. And then ask, what decision aligns with my calling, my values, and God's character? And then choose that path, even if it's harder. You may not see the full benefit immediately. Over time, those choices shape your character and your legacy as a leader. And third, name and remember your Lord will provide moments. Abraham names the place the Lord will provide as a reminder of what God did there. You likely have your own stories. Times when you made a hard decision and later saw God's provision. Moments when you thought obedience would cost you everything and God opened a different door. Seasons where you let go of something and later realized God was making room for something better. Take time to remember and write down those stories. They become anchors for future tests. When the next hard decisions come, you can look back and say, I've been here before. God was faithful then. I can trust him now. As we've reviewed this third part of leading through uncertainty, let's zoom out and look at Abraham's journey as a whole. In part one, we saw the call to lead, faith to step out when you don't have all the information. In part two, we looked at the promise delayed, faith to persevere when you're stuck in a long waiting season. And today, in the ultimate test, we've seen faith to obey and to sacrifice when leadership decisions are deeply costly. Abraham's life reminds us faith-filled leadership isn't about having every answer or controlling every outcome. It's about trusting God enough to act when he calls, to wait when he delays, and surrender when he asks you to lay something down. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Where might God be inviting you right now? To step out, to wait well, or to surrender something in your leadership? My prayer is that, like Abraham, you'll be able to look back on your own journey and say, in that season, I didn't see everything clearly, but I saw that the Lord will provide. If this series has encouraged you, I'd love for you to like, subscribe, or share it with another leader who's navigating uncertainty right now. Friends, thanks for joining today on Leading with Bill. Remember, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and we'll see you next time.